Hello, my friends. Mike Shreeve here. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for joining me for this publishing Q&A. I really appreciate everyone who has submitted questions in advance. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it is so fun for me. I genuinely just get so excited to see people entering publishing for the first time, right? Brand new authors. I love to see what they're thinking about. I love to see what they're afraid of. I love to see what they're worried about. I love to see what they're hopeful for. I love to see what's getting them stuck on things, because over the past 20 years, publishing has changed and is continuing to change. And so every 3, 4, 5 years, it's like a new set of things that people are thinking about. And I think it's one of the exciting things about being in publishing is that it is this sort of, it's on the one hand old, right? You've had publishers for a really, really long time, but it's also new and it's always changing and it's always adjusting to, now we have AI and now the publishing business itself is changing and now there's, the expert industry is changing and there's all these changes. It's just been a really fun career to have, but it's most fun because it's a career where new people are coming into it all the time. And so thank you, everyone who has submitted questions. I really, really appreciate it. My goal with these publishing Q&As is I'd like to try and do them at least once a week. If you would like to have questions answered, please, I would love to have them. Below this video, there is a link to a very simple Google Sheet. I collect none of your information. It's just the question, a name that I can call you by, and that's it. And I would love to have questions to talk about. And again, my goal here is I've been doing this coming up on my 20th year. It's time for me to just give back freely. There's no catch. There'll be no pitch at the end of this. It's just I'm here to answer questions. If I can inspire someone to do something that they wouldn't have done before watching this, for example, getting that chapter finished today like you should probably be doing right now instead of watching this Q&A, whether it's getting a belief in yourself and realizing that you do in fact have the capability and the power to get a book done, whether you do it yourself or you get somebody to help you or whatever, whether it's encouraging you with actual strategy on how to get the book sold or how to make the book or what to write about or whatever. My goal here is to inspire you to do something that you wouldn't have done without listening to this. So it's ideas and motivation and all that. That's sort of the theme of these Q&As. But there's another element to that, and it is this is a very dynamic time, I think, in the world. And whenever there's a lot of fluctuation, I think people partially, some of them take advantage of it, and then partially there's just a lot of reaction to that change. And what's happening right now in publishing is you have sort of two groups. You have a group of people who are just scared and they don't know why. And then you have a group of people who are really looking to take advantage of that fear. And I've been in this industry for more than 20 years. I've seen this cycle come and go. The current cycle will go, but right now it's here. And so my not just giving back to inspire you, but also to kind of cut through the BS. I mean, there is a lot of just BS going on right now of what people are saying who have no insight into the published industry. They have no insight into other people's books, right? There's been a couple authors who have said, well, my book sales are down, therefore everyone's must be down. There's been, there's just so much silliness. I'm here to cut through all that. I'm going to give it to you straight. I will tell you if things are what, and I have no incentive here other than to tell you the truth and tell you what's actually going on in publishing and in business as well, and with writing and all of that stuff. So that's what we're here for. Again, thank you so much for paying attention. Thank you for wanting to listen. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so our first question is from Jennifer. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I really do appreciate you taking the time and putting yourself out there too, as well. Because this is a really good question. This is an important question. It's a financially important question as much as it is a meaningfully important question. Should I write the book of my heart or write one for a specific audience? So it depends on what you want to do. If you want to treat your book like a journal, and the purpose of your book is simply for you to collect your thoughts and share those, or don't share them, with people who are close to you and in a circle, I call it the reachable circle. So these are people that you know and maybe they're friends. Then you do not have to put any thought towards worrying about some thing called the audience. If, however, you have commercial motivations of any kind, not to be confused with selling out, and I'll talk about this in a second, but if you have commercial aspirations of any kind, then you must at some point consider this very simple question: who is going to buy this? Not who's going to like it, not who's going to talk about it, not who's going to look at the cover and go, oh, interesting. This is one of the dangers of new authors getting advice from their friends, or getting advice from family, or getting advice from people who have never published a book before, or even worse, getting advice from people who have never sold books before. You have to at some point take into consideration the commercial element if commercial outcomes are your goals. If you want to sell a lot of copies, if you want people to read your book and then buy something else from you, if you're trying to start a movement, if you're trying to start a speaking career and you're using a book to do all of that, then you must take into account the laws of commercialism. And the basic law is this: people will only pay for things that they want, unless otherwise mandated, right? You could tack that on. I don't think there's a lot of people who want to pay for taxes, but they are mandated to pay for it. But most consumers will only pay for something that they want. Now, here's the mistake. Here's the mistake. What authors will do is they will ignore their heart or their motivation or their mission or their vision or their goal, trying to first figure out what the audience wants and then writing for the audience. What you should do is actually first figure out what kind of book you want and then present it in a way that an audience would say, I want that. So for example, I'll give you a very common thing that we do here at Peaceful Profits with a lot of our clients. We have a lot of people come to us and they say, I've had this life. I've had this incredible life. I've achieved this. I've had this experience. I went through this awful thing. And they want to write a memoir, just a straight, pure memoir. I just want people to know what happened to me, right? A journal that they want to share with a bunch of people. There's nothing wrong with that. Every once in a while, you have big breakout memoirs. I would be a fool to say that memoirs in and of themselves are not commercially viable. However, there's one thing you can do to practically guarantee, obviously disclaimer, your results may vary, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not promising anything to anybody. But if you want to drastically improve the chances that you will have commercial success, take those same exact stories, take those same exact ideas, write nearly the same book, except add one little element. And it is, here's what happened to me, and here's the lesson I want to share with you. Here's what happened to me. Here's what I did to overcome it, and now I want to share that with you. That little shift, going from a pure memoir to what we call a framework-based memoir, is taking the same book of your heart, but making it useful, helpful, desirable to a stranger that you may never, ever meet. And this is the shift. So it's not either or. Should I write the book of my heart, or should I write towards a specific audience? It is write the book of your heart, but as you are in the process of, in the beginning of, as you are thinking of, how do I package this thing, all my stories, all my ideas, the passion that I have, into a way that helps somebody else? That is the most fundamental, it's not the only, but it's the most fundamental way to ensure that what you produce will be desired by the buying public. And remember, the first law of commercialism, if we want commercial outcomes, people will buy what they want. What they want. Not necessarily, like I think sometimes authors make the mistake and they say, well, I want this to sell, therefore it's going to sell. That doesn't exactly, the want is on the other side of the table. The want is in the reader. I'll give you a quick example of fiction because I do a lot of fiction, like, someday I'm going to retire from Peaceful Profits and I'm going to ride off into the sunset, and my fiction business is what I'll spend the rest of my career doing. I have a fiction business right now, does 6 figures a year in net royalties. I love it. It's pen names. I don't have to deal with anything. It's just like the best thing ever. I don't talk a lot about it here in Peaceful Profits in turn, we don't have like courses or anything like that. I don't ever want to do that with fiction, but every once in a while on these Q&As it might slip through. Here's an example. I learned this from David Farland, who's one of my coaches. Amazing, amazing writing coach. He has a great book called Drawing on the Power of Resonance. He also has another book called 100 Million. I think it's $1 million outlines. I keep getting the Hormozy 100 million thing is in my head right now. It's $1 million outlines by David Farland. He wrote that book years and years and years ago. Anyways, he has this really good book called Drawing on the Power of Resonance. And I learned this in fiction, and I've since applied it to nonfiction in the work that I do with clients. It's really this simple. All human beings have at our core these stories, ideas, feelings, etc. And if we want a story or book to be more successful, the more we include the core human experiences, the core human stories, the core human emotions in the book, the higher the resonance will be with those people who also share that. So for example, there's a reason that a very popular storytelling method is somebody struggles, somebody gets kicked down, beaten up, either physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and then they rise above. Because that resonates with all human beings. We've all been through that experience, and we all want to be able to overcome. And so that's why a lot of Hollywood storytelling follows that very simple model. That's the power of resonance. Well, it applies also to nonfiction. And whether you're writing a book to grow a business or to become a speaker or to whatever, when I work with clients, there's two types of clients. There's the ones who come in and they're so in touch already with that book of their heart that really the only work we have to do is make sure there's a lesson at the end of it. And then sometimes we have clients who come in and they just want their book to be lessons. That book that's just lessons, that's just information, it will not sell as well as the one that started as a book of the heart and then added, the takeaways, lessons, and was made desirable to be commercially viable. And so the work that we have to do with those particular clients is to be able to pull out elements from, for example, how did you learn that lesson? What was the experience that you went through to learn that lesson? We find this especially with the more technical type authors. So say, for example, they're writing a hard business book, right? Or maybe their background is, we find this a lot sometimes with specific, I find this so fascinating, with specific specialty types in the world of medicine. There just are certain doctors that are definitely way more technically minded. And when we work with them, you really have to kind of help them see how important the resonance and the emotional resonance is in conveying the information. Not everybody went to school for 100 years reading, 6-inch thick medical textbooks, right? Most people, they want a little bit of that emotional resonance. It's why they watch TV. It's why reality TV got so popular over the years. It's the purest form of emotional resonance, raw emotion and drama and all of that stuff, right? So, this is a pretty long and convoluted way of answering this question, but The reality is there is no or in this answer. It's not should you write the book of your heart or write one for a specific audience. It is first to decide whether you need to incorporate the 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 demands of commercialism, which is to say to make something that other people will want, and if so, then make sure you have the parts of you, that the book of your heart, and then make sure also that you have those other elements which make it more appealing to others. Okay, Jennifer, I hope that has helped. Let's go ahead and jump on to the next one. Okay, so this is a really good question from Mateus. Can you still make good money with just one book? Okay, very good question. Because the answer is yes, if. Not yes, but yes, if. So there's a couple of things that you have to understand about publishing. And it is that what you are fighting for in publishing, more than in any other business I've been a part of, and I've been a part of lots of businesses. I've had coaching businesses, I've run consulting businesses, I've run done for you, like agency businesses. I've been a part of a lot of different companies. I work with every different type of business owner and professional and expert that you can imagine over the past 20 years. I've seen inside all sorts of different businesses, and I'm just saying all of that, not to brag, it's been a long career, but just simply to say that of all the business models I've ever seen, I've never seen a business model which requires you to fight so much and so hard for what very little margin exists in the product. And so the core, a lot of people, they're like, I think the way to figure out if you're going to make a ton of money in publishing is to have like the best marketing strategy. No, it's to have the most preserved and available margin in whatever book product you've created. So whether it's paperback, hardcover, ebook, Audible, audiobook, that's what you have to first figure out. That's the hinge that swings the door. And I'll give you some examples to illustrate this point. If, for example, you were to self-publish, and in the process of self-publishing, you get to choose your own price. I've seen a lot of really good books not get the exposure they could have had because the author couldn't afford to spend any money on marketing because they priced themselves out of the margin they needed to be able to afford the marketing. And I'll explain this here in a second. If, for example, I'm just going to make up a bunch of numbers here. Let's say you have a $10 book, and let's say that after you pay all the different platforms and whatnot, let's say you've got like $3.50 left. Let's just an example. Well, if you want to make any profit off of that book, it means you really only have $2 maybe, because you have to account for returns, you have to account for whatever additional fees are coming out, however you're processing that, it's 3% off the top if you're using Stripe, et cetera, et cetera. So you maybe have $2 in marketing budget to be able to spend on that book to make a couple cents, not even a full dollar probably. That's a tough business. And if that's the only product you have, that's a tough business. Now, if you were to, let's say, self-publish but not rely on platforms, let's say you were self-hosting, and it turns out to print a 200-page book, you get a lot more margin. And let's say that you have the cash available to order a large print run, so you get a discount. And so you're just constantly sort of chipping away at the margin, right? This is why authors, it's like, should I be on Amazon? Should I get a traditional publishing deal where they give you a sliver? I mean, some of these traditional publishing deals are insane. I don't understand why some authors take traditional publishing deals other than there is still this incorrect idea that a traditionally published book is somehow better than a self-published book. I can give you an example right off the bat. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins, a book I helped launch many, many years ago, has sold more than 3 million copies, self-published. It's undeniable. You can no longer look someone in the eye and say that there is some massive gap between self-published and traditionally published. I was recently listening to an interview by Adam Grant. He sold 30 million copies of his book, Atomic Habits, and he said that his publisher sent him on 4 podcasts. That's it. He's had to pay a publisher a big portion of his margin for a long time, and all they really did was send him on 4 podcasts. You know what he did? He went on 200 more podcasts in 6 months after his book launched himself. He booked the podcast. He went on the podcast. He did it. The traditional publishing deal is it just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Even I mean, there's a couple of things you might want it for, but even then, I don't know. The distribution deals you can get now, like Walmart, for example. I understand not everybody wants to be in Walmart, but if you're looking for mass audience adoption, you can get into Walmart yourself. You don't need gatekeepers anymore. You can do deals with Target. You can do deals with Barnes and Noble. You can do the deals. Uh, it takes work. It takes elbow grease. You have to know how to do it, but it's not rocket science. And so again, it's just this idea of like, can you make good money with just one book? And the answer is, well, I mean, yes, it just depends on what you're trying to do. Are you willing to protect the margin of this very thin margin thing called a book? Because look, the reality of a book is it is a product in a market where there are tons of options. Go into a Barnes and Noble. Now, if you have a business yourself, imagine if your customer went into a Barnes and Noble of your service compared to everybody else's service. And literally like you had to stand right next to the guy who's selling something very similar to yours. What do you think the natural laws of economics are going to do? Well, as supply goes up, demand goes down. So there's always downward price pressure on books, always. And so this, again, it is a fight to preserve margin with books. And it's why, can you still make good money with just one book? Yes. Atomic Habits, 30 million copies. Even if he is getting taken to the cleaners by his traditional publishing company, that's still a multi-million-dollar net royalty book. But how many 30 million copy bestsellers are there? Not very many. And so you have to take that into account as well. And I have a whole post on Substack about what he had to do to get there, and I think most people aren't willing to do what he had to do. It's just, I did one the other day on Substack as well about Mel Robbins. I don't think people understand the amount of work and effort. It's not a couple weeks, it's not a couple months, it's years and years and years. Building up 2, 3, 400,000 person email lists before you launch the book. Then you launch it. Then it sells a couple 100,000 copies in the first year. Then it grows. Then it starts to spiral. Then you get into the millions of copies sold, and et cetera, right? But for everybody else, margin protection. That's what's important. The other thing you can do to make sure that your book makes you a ton of money, and this is actually an article I'm working on soon for Substack. I wrote a book, protected my own margin. It has only sold 60,000 copies since 2019, but it has made me $20 million. How has it done that? Well, I don't like living the life of low margin. I don't know if, I don't know what your experience is here, Mateus, or anyone listening, but low margin is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. If your marketing campaigns have a bad week, which they will, margin disappears. Say, for example, you're running Amazon ads or something, and Amazon decides to roll out an update, and your ads that were barely hanging on and you were making like $1.20 for every book that you sold, all of a sudden you're losing money, and the whole month's royalty is wiped out in a week of ads. That's not how I want to live my life. I've got a mortgage. I have kids. I have bills to pay, and they want to get paid on time, regardless of how my book is doing. So what I do, and what I encourage as many of my clients to do as will listen, is I put something on the back of the book. It doesn't really matter what it is. It's something else. Think about this. If you were to just sell a $300 course on the back of your book, and at the back of the book you said, okay, thank you so much for reading this book. I have something for free. Sign up and you can get it. And then they sign up and they're on an email list. And every once in a while you tell the email list, hey, I have this $300 course. You went from a margin of $1.50 to a margin of $300 because now you have this course which has no delivery cost. But you don't have to do courses. If you don't want to do courses, don't do courses. You could sell other things. You could sell speaking. Do a speech, $7,500 minimum, 10 grand minimum. Sell a couple thousand copies. Somebody's going to hire you. You've just made, that book has made you 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, however many it is, however many speaking gigs you secure off that. And now all of a sudden, the answer to this question, can you still make good money with just one book? Now it's like, yes, absolutely. You can make very, 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 very good money. And that's a model that a lot of authors in the nonfiction space follow because it works. And, I think a lot of people say, oh, does that mean a book has to be a sales letter? No. Make the best book you possibly can. Just invite the people at the end of it to do something else with you. That's all. And I can promise you, if you write a really good nonfiction book, let's say, for example, you use the sort of framework-based memoir style where you're telling people how to do something, like help them with something, and you're giving them stories and there's emotional resonance and they're totally bought in, they're going to ask you if you have something else, whether you have something else or not. This I can promise you, this is something I see all the time. It might be one of the most common things that I see occur and have seen over and over and over again in the past 20 years, and it's that a good book will yield requests. This is something that I've been trying to hammer into this marketplace and into this industry. Solving a problem creates more problems. So if you write a really, really good book, let's say, for example, you help people discover what their passion is, that'd be a good book. Guess what? You just made this person you just gave them a huge problem. Maybe they're like, I don't know what my passion is. I want to find out who I am. And they do. And now they know who they are and they know what their passion is. Well, now they have a real big problem. Now they know. And now they have this almost burden of knowing, what am I going to do about it? How do I maximize it? What do I do? You can write another book. Now that you know what your passion is, here's what you do about it. That's one way to increase your margin. Really, it's technically average order value, but let's just call margin because let's just keep it all simple, because people will buy book 1 and they'll buy book 2. So your average reader didn't just spend $10, they spent $20. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is say, hey, if you found this a helpful book, come join my community. We help people, go through the process of finding their passion and then doing something about it. Come to one of my speeches or book me as a speaker. We can talk all about this. I have a program, consulting, whatever. I have services. Maybe you're a hypnotherapist. Sign up for my hypnotherapy, whatever it is. They're going to ask for it anyways if you write a really good book. So you might as well be the person who helps them. And, it's something that I like to do with clients. If they come to me and they say, look, I already have something I want to sell, then you can reverse engineer the type of book you should write to get people to read the book. And then the next logical step for them would be to work with you because you just helped them. You just gave them a new, bigger, better problem to have. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question there, Mateus. I really appreciate it. Excellent question. Very important question too, right? Because one second. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Yes, you can make tons of money. Protect your margin. Lots of different ways to do that. Just explain that. Also, books are not easy. So it is worth asking, is this going to ROI for me? Because, and look, I get it. There's probably going to be somebody who's going to watch this and be like, he's sold out or whatever. Look, I'm a dad. I run a company. I understand how valuable and precious time is. And it's not about money for a lot of people. ROI isn't necessarily money related, but I think it's important if you're going to embark on something as serious as a book and pour as much of yourself into that thing as you are going to have to pour into it in order for it to be good. I never recommend that people take writing a book lightly. Oh, no. You'll just write a floppy book. I mean, it just won't do well. You have to pour yourself into this thing. But as much as that's going to cost you in time, energy, effort, commitment, etc., I think it's very reasonable and logical, and is not a sellout thing to say, okay, is this going to benefit me at all if I'm going to do this thing? So yeah, this is an excellent question. I think more people should be asking it. I think they should be thinking about it. I think they should be making plans of how they're going to ROI from a book. Because again, it's, the way I think about it is that the best thing an author can do is write the second book. One for themselves, like just financially speaking, but also for the audience that they're writing for, because those second books tend to be something real special. Because first off, you've gone through the process of writing a book, but also you've gone through the process of having readers respond to your work. And so those second books have something that typically the first books don't have, which is that reader response. And there's some really good second books out there. And so for me, one of the best ways to ensure that an author gets a second book done is that the first one has a payoff for the effort it took. Now, just a little caveat here. A lot of authors write a book and then think that's it and just expect the world to shower them with praise and expect the millions of copies to be sold. No, go to my Substack, see what it takes to actually sell a bunch. So you have to write the book and then you have to go out and market it. I don't understand this idea that just writing a book it will automatically sell. I don't understand why people think books are like magic. They're a product like every other product, and like I said before, there's tons of choices for readers. You really have to work to get attention. But if you do all that, right, my goal would be for you to have some kind of positive net outcome as a result, because it'll get you to write the second one. And that's the best thing that you could do, in my opinion. Okay, so thank you for that. Excellent question. Okay, this is a good one too. What is the best way to find a good book idea? And this is from Margaret. First off, I love how you phrased this question. You said, how do you find a good book idea? First off, there's an entire industry, it's like a sub-genre of writing on how to find book ideas. I recommend that you read as many of them as you can, because basically what you'll find is that there's tons of different ways to do it. I'll give you some ideas, ones that I like, but I think there's something even more important here, which is the second you start thinking about what you're going to write about, two things are going to happen in your brain. The first is something called the reticulating activating system. It is, if you've ever, like, back when people watched commercials, you would see a commercial for a red car, and then you would go outside and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many of these red cars. And what's happening is that your brain saw something. Subconsciously or consciously, you said, I think that thing is important. And so it then actively started noticing stuff that already existed. It's not like there was suddenly a bunch of red cars on the road. It's just it's now noticing the red cars that were already there. So you have to understand that this is in your brain. This is, deep human, ancient human type stuff. This is recognizing the berries as you're walking through the woods of all the different shades of green and color and brown and etc. And the shadows casting and changing the colors. You still recognize that blue berry because that's what keeps you alive. That's the reticulating activating system. When you start to write and when you start to think of ideas, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to think of ideas, like lots of them. And it's going to start feeling like too much. And there's a better way to describe it is, because there will be so many of them, none of them will seem that important. And when they don't seem that important, simply because there's so many of them, you think, I need to wait for some moment. I need to wait for like the light to come, break through the clouds, and for the one title to emerge from the bottom of the whatever, and there it is, and that's the why. And of all the ideas that have been going through my mind, it's clear my heart will swell. And that's what we think needs to happen because we're overwhelmed now by our brain doing what it's trying to do to give us what we want, which is, we said, I want a title. I want an idea. I need an idea. And so it's giving us all these different So it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and we have a hard time not recognizing that it is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so we look for something bigger. And the second thing that's happening at the same time is we are doubting ourselves. This doubt. One of my favorite quotes is Dune is a cool series. I'm not like a Dune fanatic like a lot of people, even though I actually live like, I don't know, 25 minutes, 30 minutes away from where Frank wrote Dune, so very close to it. But fear is the mind killer. Ooh, I love that. I think you could spend the rest of your life just pondering that line from his book, Dune. Fear is the mind killer. So while your mind is tossing out all these different ideas as you're trying to search for them, maybe you're reading books on how to get ideas, maybe you're journaling how to get ideas, maybe you're just thinking, going on walks, whatever you're doing. At the same time, every idea that comes up, the initial reaction is what? It's fear. It's doubt. Why? Why would it be fear and doubt? Think about what a book is. A book is you putting yourself out there. It is, I can never remember the exact order, but one of the top, 3 or 5 fears of every human being is public speaking. Maybe not on a conscious level, but subconsciously, we know that putting all of this in a book, nobody thinks they're writing a book and no one's going to read it. We all think in our minds, people are going to read this. And we may even think a lot of people are going to read this. Well, what's the natural reaction of the brain? A little bit of anxiety, a little bit of fear. And what does fear do? Fear is the mind killer. In other words, it dulls our ability to function at a high level. We literally become dumber. We become more dulled in our senses, less sensitive to inputs to protect ourselves. These are all systems that are working naturally, but they sure don't help us write a book. They sure don't help us pick an idea. And so you have to be aware that these are happening because on the one hand, your brain is feeding you probably good ideas while simultaneously saying, that's not a good idea, that's not a good idea, that's not a good idea, to protect itself from putting itself out there. It could also be protecting itself from the amount of work it's going to have to do to write a good book. If you've done any research into writing a book, you know it's not going to be a weekend job. This, lock in many hours. You're going to have to pull things out. It's going to be it's going to be work. And so sometimes part of that fear, part of that doubt, part of that pushback is just the brain being like, dude, you have too much stuff going on already. Don't do this also. We have to recognize that's fear. That's fear. It's not an indicator as to whether you should do it or not. And this is an important part of book writing and getting your book going. And just in life in general, I think, is that fear is not necessarily the signal as to whether you should or shouldn't do something, which means the self-doubt that you have is not a good way to measure whether an idea you've had or found is good. And I think that's one mistake that a lot of authors make. They think, well, I don't know, it might not, and because I don't have a lot of confidence in it, it may not, So then you have to start asking yourself, okay, if that's going on in my brain, how do I know that there is a good, like how do I know whether this idea is good or not? Well, you have two tools that you can use. I recommend using them both, but at least use one. Don't use none of them. The first, and I think probably the most important one, is to get in touch with your mission for the book. Because your mission, not your vision. See, the vision is like, what are all the great things that are going to happen because I write this? Or what do I even, what's the shape of, what is the book cover going to look like? What's the mission? Why are you writing this thing? If you don't know why you are writing this thing, then any idea that you come up with could be the right idea, and that is the perfect scenario for your brain to just come up with all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't do it. What you need, rule number one of creativity, is that creativity needs constraints. Okay, it needs rules. It needs, you can go here but not here. Here's the little box that you need to go in. And most people think creativity is all about just like splashing paint on the wall and whatever. But even the artists that splash paint on the wall, their constraints are, I can only splash paint on the wall, right? Like there's even in those scenarios where a non-creative might look at that and be like, whoa, they're just like totally wild. They themselves have constraints. They're only working in paint, or they're only working on this canvas, or they're only this, or there are built-in constraints to all creative endeavors. And when you're writing a book, which is literally taking things out of your brain and making something that didn't exist, and it's just words on a page, one of the most ethereal kind of things that you can do as a human being, and then trying to sell that to others, you need constraints. You need to be able to put all of this vastness into some kind of container in which you can start making some decisions. And this, I think, is more important than like finding the best idea, is figuring out how to make a decision. Because I think that's ultimately what people are asking when they're like, how do I find a good idea? You've probably had ideas before. What you're struggling with is, how do you decide? And it has to do with constraints. Well, the best way to make constraints is to have a mission for the book, fiction or nonfiction. What is the purpose? Why are you doing this? Think about it this way. If your answer is, because I just want to make as much money as possible, guess what you can do? Now you have a little thing. I envision it. I envision it as like a clipboard with like a checklist. Okay, my goal is to make as much money as possible. All right, idea number one, present yourself. Okay, here comes idea number one. Check. It's commercially viable. It has high resonance. There's been lots of books that have done this before. Check, 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 check. Okay, wow, you're an idea that would work. Next idea. Oh, you're just like the journal of myself. It's talking about my 12, when I was 12 and I had a birthday or whatever, and like nobody cares about that. Okay, you clearly do not qualify. You can start to filter ideas. And my recommendation is actually that you spend time thinking about and getting specific on your mission. Making a bunch of money is a mission, but it's not necessarily your mission. Because you don't just want money, you want specific money. I know you don't just want money, because I could go, I could say, okay, you just want money, just go dig ditches. And just dig more ditches than anybody else, and you'll make tons of money. And you're like, well, no, that's not exactly what I want. Yeah, that same thought process is true for whatever you think your mission is right now for your book. You may say, I just want to touch people's lives. You don't want to touch everybody's lives. Like there are some people I know you don't want to have to deal with, right? Like, so who specifically? How specifically? What do you mean touch their lives? And as soon as you start building out this mission and building it out and building it clear, all of a sudden now that reticulating activating system, it gets sharper as well. Because before you just told it, I need a book idea. So it's throwing out all sorts of just craziness. But the second you start to really pull it in and understand the mission component and how it creates the constraints, then you begin to realize that the more you focus in on that internal mission, the more clarity you will have. And then you'll start to have those experiences where it feels like the idea is presenting itself. It will feel like the heavens have parted. It will feel like you have landed on it, when all that really happened is you set up constraints and only a few ideas survived, and they now are so much more obvious than they were before. That's all that happened. So that's the first thing, is this internal mission. The second thing is external feedback. And there's two ways to do that. One, getting external feedback from a professional who's just done it and who knows like what's selling right now. So I pay a lot of money every month to be on professional reports that are telling me exactly what book sold, what the deal amount was, who bought it, who the agent was that sold it, like what the publishing house was. I know about, launch numbers, how much books are making. So as a professional doing this for 20 years, I can just say, yeah, these are the books that are selling right now. And what is that? That's just a constraint. So you can think of your ideas and then within the constraint say, well, does it match something like all of the books that are selling right now? Right? It's just another constraint. The other one would then be getting like a bunch of feedback. So this could be, for example, there's a fun one called Ugly Baby. I love that website. I spend way too much money there. You can just have people like tear your idea apart, and it's really fun. You can run, the old story. I'm gonna botch all the details, but the 4-hour work week. I think he did like Amazon Turks or something, and had people vote on it. If you have an email list, you can run those ideas by your email list. If you have an audience, run the ideas by the audience, etc., etc. Now, the mistake you would make is that you let the audience write the book. It's still your book. Okay, so all you're using these external feedback sources for is to help with some constraints, right? To say, okay, of the 6 ideas, these are the 2 or 3 that the audience kind of resonated with most. Okay, I'm down to 2 or 3, right? Now I'm going to consult my internal mission. Of these 2 or 3, how does it match the internal mission of why I'm trying to write this book? And then now you're starting to get into some real good stuff. This is where you start building up confidence in your idea. And that, again, we're almost at an hour here, so I'll stop here in a second. But how do you find, what's the best way to find a good book idea? I just gave you a couple of ideas, but what is a good book idea? It's the one that gets you to write the book. Because before you write the book, I mean, I don't know, publishing is just one of those silly things where people think that they could never have done it before, but somehow know in advance if they're going to be one of the best to have ever done it. It's very strange, the expectations that people have. It's very unusual. People don't normally think that when they do other jobs, but for some reason in publishing, that's how people think. So what you have to do then is you have a good idea for you is the one that gets you to write the book. So whether that is you believe it's going to fulfill your mission, okay, fine, that's whatever. If that gets you to write the book, cool. Whether it's you think it's going to make you a lot of money, okay, cool, fine, whatever. If that's what gets you to write the book. Whether it's one that you just feel like you feel is the one that you need to do, okay, cool, fine, whatever. Like whatever gets you to write the book. Whether it's the one that you are most inspired by, and you just can't get it out of your brain, cool, fine, whatever gets you to write the book. Because what you need to do is start writing the book. Because if I had $1 for every time somebody had an idea, they started writing the book, and as soon as the words started hitting the page, they're like, oh, this wasn't the right idea at all. I need to completely change everything. And if I had $1 for every time that happened, I wouldn't have to work for a living. And that's like genuinely the truth. Because there's one thing about having an idea beforehand, and there's another thing in executing that idea. A lot of ideas will shift, a lot of ideas will change. A book is a thing that you experience page by page. I think Stephen King said it the best. A book is written in the same way that a paleontologist, unearths a fossil. You start brushing a little here. You notice that this looks like the spine, so you follow the spine down. That looks like a tail. You come over here. That looks like a hip bone. Okay, that looks like and you're just brushing it away. And you kind of think you know what it's going to be, but every brush stroke reveals some new piece of information. So the best idea is the one that gets you to start writing the book. Because you got to go through that process. And then you have to hit publish. And when you hit publish, they have to start selling. And you have to start getting reader feedback. And you have to. It's like I said, the best thing an author can do is write that second book, because you are going to learn a lot. You are going to learn a lot about yourself, about book selling, about growing and marketing books and growing a business with a book when you publish that first one. And so it's, in my opinion, it's very, very important to get the first one out as soon as possible. The smartest clients that I have, they all have more than one book, and every book gets better and better. Compare, for example, Mel Robbins' 5-second rule to the let them theory. Why do you think the let them theory did so well? Because it was the third book she wrote after the 5-second rule, because she wrote the 5-second habits in between. Of course, the let them theory is doing what it's doing right now, 6 million copies a year. Of course. It was inevitable because it was the third one. She's done it now enough to really know how to do it, right? Same thing with any book written by anybody. You just keep getting better every time you write. And I encourage all people who are serious about becoming authors to really just think about that as the career path. John C. Maxwell, I got to work with him many years ago, more than 100 books published. It's the smartest way to do it. But that's a whole nother thing for a whole nother time. I've already gone way longer than I think probably anybody wanted to hear me go. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this. Thank you for tuning in. Please remember, below this video, there is a link to a form. You can submit questions. I would love to answer whatever question you have. I'll try to do this once a week. As you can see, I get going, so I'm probably not going to get through a lot of questions every week, but we will go deep. I'll try to go as deep as I possibly can. And as long as you can deal with how verbose and wordy I am. I mean, I do words for a living, so not that big of a surprise. I'll keep doing these, and hopefully it helps. That's my goal here. Let's cut through some of the noise that's going on right now out there on the interwebs, and let's just talk about what's really going on and what it really takes, because publishing is still very much, I think publishing now is more important than it probably ever has been. It's getting to the point where it's going to be one of the last things that people trust in an AI heavy world where people can't quite tell, is this what, like, is this real? I think we're headed to a place where if trust is important to you, it's for my nonfiction authors, you're going to need to have a book. Like, you're going to just need to have it just to establish that you are legitimate. And anyways, again, I'm going to go on a little side thing here, but the point is, I want to do these Q&As so that we can cut through all that. I just tell it like it is. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, and we will see you hopefully next week. Thanks.